Have you ever felt just inexplicably exhausted? And I don't mean just tired from a long day at work. I mean a deep cellular fatigue that, a full night of sleep just doesn't seem to touch.
Yeah, that kind of bone-deep exhaustion.
Exactly. Or maybe you've noticed this sudden weight gain right around your middle, or you're dealing with like this relentless brain fog that just will not lift. And then when you finally take these concerns to a professional, you're just met with a sympathetic smile and a total dismissal. Like, well, you're just getting older.
Right. It's it is honestly the most common, most frustrating brush-off in modern medicine.
Yeah.
We hand millions of people, particularly women, this narrative that daily suffering and, well, systemic decline are just the natural taxes we pay for aging.
It's like a substitute for actual medical investigation.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
I mean, we just slap a label of aging on it and call it a day.
Well, today's deep dive is about completely dismantling that exact narrative. We are pulling from this incredibly dense, revealing transcript from the Ultimate Human podcast, and it features a guest who, she kind of lives at the intersection of two very distinct medical worlds.
She really does. She's a board-certified OB-GYN, right? With, I think, 27 years of clinical experience and something crazy, like over 8,000 deliveries under her belt.
Yeah, 8,000. It's wild. But she also holds 2 master's degrees in functional medicine alongside these really specialized certifications in ozone therapy, which, by the way, is the use of ozone gas to combat oxidative stress and, stimulate the immune system.
Right, and she does peptide therapy too,
Yeah.
utilizing those short chains of amino acids to trigger specific cellular repair. So she's not just prescribing the standard stuff.
Exactly. She possesses this critical vantage point. Having spent decades in the traditional allopathic model, I mean, she knows the conventional protocols inside and out. But her shift into functional and regenerative medicine happened precisely because she recognized where those traditional protocols were just systematically failing patients.
Yeah, because they're treating symptoms in total isolation rather than addressing the root biological systems, like putting a Band-Aid on a check engine light.
Oh, exactly. So our mission today is to explore the hidden mechanics of female hormones. We're going to trace the biological line from fertility struggles all the way to the dread of perimenopause and menopause.
Because it's all connected.
It is all connected. We're unpacking the specific hormone ratios, the hidden nutrient deficiencies, and the genetic bottlenecks that dictate how you feel from the literal moment you wake up.
Right.
Because the core premise of our source material is simple, but it's pretty radical. Suffering is not a biological requirement.
We are essentially looking at the human biochemical operating system today. Once we understand how the code actually works, we can finally stop blaming the user for the glitches.
I love that. Okay, so let's unpack this, because the first major revelation from the transcript completely flips how we view an entire phase of human life: menopause.
Right, the big M.
Yeah. The common medical consensus is that perimenopause, the transitional phase leading up to menopause, usually begins around age 45 to 50. But the data our source brings forward shows this transition is happening to women younger and younger.
Oh, way younger. Women in their early 30s are now exhibiting classic signs of hormonal decline. We are seeing this premature onset of hot flashes, which they eventually affect about 85% of women.
Wow, 85%.
Yeah, it's huge. And we're seeing profound sleep architecture disruption, loss of libido, sudden mood dysregulation, and that very specific middle belly weight gain. The clinical data often reveals that it isn't even just adipose tissue like fat, but severe hormonally driven fluid retention.
The traditional medical model treats this entire phase as like a temporary storm. The advice essentially boils down to battening down the hatches and just getting through it.
Just guff it out.
Right. The assumption is that you will suffer, your body will become totally unrecognizable for a few years, but eventually the storm passes, the symptoms stop, and you're safe on the other side.
But the source material aggressively challenges that assumption. In fact, it provides this biological reframing that I think should change how every practitioner views menopause entirely. Because the traditional marker of getting through it is just the cessation of hot flashes.
Right. When you stop sweating through your sheets, you think you're cured.
Exactly. But the OB-GYN points out that if your hot flashes eventually stop as you age, but you never actually treated the underlying hormonal imbalance, you didn't win any battle.
Your body just got sicker.
Your body lost the physiological ability to mount the response. I mean, to understand this, we really have to look at the mechanics of a vasomotor symptom. That's what a hot flash is.
Okay, let's get into the weeds on that.
So a hot flash is not some random glitch. It is a biological alarm bell. It's a failure in the thermoregulatory feedback loop in your brain, specifically the hypothalamus. And this failure is driven by a massive sudden imbalance between progesterone and estrogen.
So the brain is just freaking out.
Pretty much. The brain senses this chemical chaos, loses its grip on temperature control, and frantically triggers vasodilation, which is the widening of your blood vessels to just dump heat. It is a robust, active response to a severe deficiency.
That makes me think of like a home thermostat that has lost its electrical connection to the furnace. The sensor in the hallway registers a massive temperature drop, so it cranks the dial up, but the wiring is scrambled.
Yes, perfect analogy.
So the furnace just fires blindly and uncontrollably, blasting heat into the house. And the traditional advice of toughing it out is basically just waiting a decade until the furnace motor completely burns out. When the house is freezing and the furnace stops firing, you don't say, oh good, the storm has passed and the thermostat is fixed.
No, the heating system is fundamentally broken. The engine is compromised. You are now living in a sicker, less resilient state, and the warning system has simply collapsed. This is why the age of onset dropping is such a critical warning sign for our population health.
We have to look at what's causing that premature drop, though. Why are women in their 30s experiencing this systemic thermostat failure? The source points to the environment the human body is operating in right now, specifically highlighting, modern chronic stress, environmental toxins, and nutrient-depleted diets.
Because our ancient biological rhythms are just colliding with modern environmental realities. I mean, the human nervous system evolved to handle acute stress. You encounter a predator, your body floods with cortisol and adrenaline to survive the next 10 minutes, and then you recover.
Right. You either get eaten or you run away and take a nap.
Exactly. But today, chronic stress, a relentless high-pressure job, toxic relationships, sleep deprivation, or even physiological stressors like overexercising that acts as a continuous low-grade danger signal.
The body's threat detection system doesn't differentiate between an impending work deadline and an impending famine, does it?
It does not. It just registers threat. And when the body believes it is under threat, it ruthlessly prioritizes short-term survival over long-term thriving.
It literally diverts biological resources.
Totally. The body views reproduction, deep sleep, and optimal hormone production as absolute luxuries. If you are in a survival state, the body will funnel its raw materials away from those luxury systems and just pour everything into sustaining the stress response.
This completely recontextualizes the history of female healthcare for me. For generations, women were told to accept that losing their sex drive, experiencing painful vaginal dryness, gaining weight, feeling depressed, that these were simply the unavoidable consequences of getting older.
We normalized pathology.
Yeah.
That's what we did. We looked at a predictable, environmentally driven biological deficiency, and we labeled it a natural rite of passage. If we extrapolate the source's findings, much of what society considers the natural aging process in women is actually just prolonged, untreated biochemical deficiency.
If you are listening right now and thinking about your own health, evaluate your baseline. Are you accepting daily discomforts, waking up exhausted, feeling irritable, dealing with brain fog as inevitable? Because the data suggests you might just be dealing with a correctable deficiency.
And understand how to correct it. We really have to look under the hood at the three main characters driving this entire system: estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone.
Okay, let's analyze their specific roles, starting with estrogen.
So biologically, estrogen is the hormone of growth and proliferation. It is a stimulant. In the context of the female body, its job is to build things up like the uterine lining. Systemically, estrogen holds onto water, and it actively feeds and expands fat cells.
So when a woman describes feeling like she's suddenly retaining fluid, like she's carrying an inner tube of water weight around her midsection, that is the direct effect of unmitigated estrogen.
That's it, exactly. It is the stimulant acting without a buffer. Because in a healthy system, estrogen is perfectly counterweighted by progesterone.
The yin to the yang.
Right. If estrogen is the accelerator, progesterone is the calming, soothing brake pedal. It physically slows neuronal firing in the brain. It promotes the architecture of deep restorative sleep. It is the great stabilizer of the female hormonal system.
And then we have testosterone, which honestly completely upends the traditional societal narrative. We've been culturally conditioned to view testosterone exclusively as the male hormone, right? Associated with giant muscles, aggression, masculinity.
And that cultural misconception has done catastrophic damage to women's health. The source material emphasizes that testosterone is absolutely vital for female biological function. Women have testosterone receptors all over their bodies, particularly in the brain.
Wait, really? In the brain?
Yes, it is crucial for protecting cognition, maintaining sharp memory, and clearing away brain fog. It sustains baseline energy levels,
Mhm.
and crucially, testosterone drives the production of red blood cells and hemoglobin, which are responsible for carrying oxygen to every single cell in the body.
Looking at the sequence of depletion in the transcript, it seems like estrogen isn't necessarily the villain we make it out to be. It's just the last one standing when progesterone and testosterone leave the party.
The sequence is everything. The very first hormones to drop, either as a woman ages or as she faces intense chronic stress, are progesterone and testosterone.
Leaving a sea of unchecked estrogen. And this happens because of this metabolic triage process the text hints at, which is commonly referred to in functional medicine as the pregnenolone steal, right?
Yes, the pregnenolone steal. Let's break down the biochemistry of that triage because it's fascinating. All of your primary steroid hormones, as estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, as well as your primary stress hormone, cortisol, they are all synthesized from a single master precursor hormone called pregnenolone.
And pregnenolone is derived from cholesterol, if I remember correctly.
Exactly. Think of pregnenolone as a giant shipment of raw lumber arriving at a construction site.
Okay, I like this. Under normal, peaceful conditions, the body uses that lumber to build a balanced neighborhood. It frames out some estrogen, uses plenty of lumber to build a solid structure of calming progesterone, and sets aside enough for the energy and cognition of testosterone.
Exactly. But when a chronic stressor is introduced, whether it's poor sleep, emotional trauma, or gut inflammation, the biological alarm sounds. The body immediately halts construction on the neighborhood. It commandeers that raw lumber, the pregnenolone, and shuttles it almost entirely down a separate metabolic pathway to manufacture cortisol and adrenaline.
It sacrifices the production of the calming hormone and the energizing hormone just to ensure you have enough stress hormone to survive the perceived threat.
Right. It's an evolutionary feature. It was designed to save us from an acute threat like a tiger, but has become a devastating modern bug. The modern world is a chronic tiger. We never rest, so the steal happens 200 to 47.
The body is locked in a perpetual state of biological theft.
A biological theft. That is exactly what it is. And this leaves women severely depleted of the exact hormones they need to feel human. The OB-GYN notes how frequently the medical establishment dismisses testosterone replacement for women, citing these unfounded fears of sudden aggression or growing facial hair.
Which is just wild that that's the standard response.
I know, but when clinicians replace these hormones using bioidentical formulations, meaning the molecular structure of the hormone exactly matches what the human ovary naturally produces, unlike the synthetic, patentable versions, the results are profound. At physiologic, female-appropriate doses, women get their brains back.
The fog lifts, energy returns. And their mild chronic anemia often resolves because the testosterone stimulates proper red blood cell production again.
Right. The transcript outlines a specific protocol for progesterone that illustrates just how powerful restoring this balance can be. The OB-GYN prescribes bioidentical progesterone to be taken at night. She describes it as basically bathing the body in calm.
By providing bioidentical progesterone before bed, you are artificially restoring the counterweight that the chronic stress response stole during the day.
Yes. It occupies the GABA receptors in the brain, which physically slows down the racing, looping thoughts that keep so many women awake. It restores deep sleep architecture. The source also notes it resolves severe tissue issues like vaginal dryness, which is a massive, widely ignored quality of life issue that stems directly from this hormonal void.
It's providing the brake pedal to a system that's been accelerating uncontrollably, but getting the hormones into the body or helping the body produce them is only half the equation, right?
Right.
Because the transcript makes a sharp pivot here. What happens if your body utilizes the hormones, but then physically cannot get rid of them?
Oh, this introduces the metabolism puzzle, and it really clarifies the true meaning of estrogen dominance.
Estrogen dominance is a term thrown around constantly in wellness circles, and it usually implies that a woman simply has a massive, abnormally high absolute level of estrogen. But the source material clarifies that it's actually a ratio problem.
Yeah. Standard blood tests can be incredibly misleading here. Depending on the specific day of a woman's menstrual cycle, a normal absolute estrogen level could be in the low teens, or it could be surging up into the 400s.
Both numbers are technically normal, depending on whether she's on day 3 or day 14 of her cycle.
Exactly. But if her progesterone production has flatlined due to that pregnenolone steal we talked about, then even an estrogen level in the low teens makes her functionally estrogen dominant. She has the cellular stimulant without the required calming buffer. The ratio is completely skewed.
But the danger of unchecked estrogen goes far beyond weight gain and irritability. Hormones are essentially chemical messengers. They lock into a cell, deliver their instruction like retain water or grow uterine tissue, and then they must be broken down by the liver and eliminated from the body.
They have to clear out.
Right. And the OB-GYN explains that if your body cannot efficiently eliminate the estrogen you've used, you reabsorb it, you recycle it.
And recycled estrogen is highly volatile. When estrogen is reabsorbed, it is often forced down a secondary, highly toxic metabolic pathway in the liver. These specific estrogen metabolites have the capacity to bind to and alter cellular DNA.
Oh, wow. So it changes the DNA.
Yeah. This is the biological origin point for the increased risks of hormone-driven cancers, such as breast and uterine cancer. It isn't necessarily that the original estrogen molecule itself is inherently bad. It is the toxic, recycled metabolites of uncleared estrogen that cause the cellular damage.
This is why the source advocates so strongly for advanced metabolic testing, specifically mentioning the DU-TCH test, right? Which is a comprehensive dried urine test for comprehensive hormones.
Yes, because a standard blood draw is just a snapshot. It tells you exactly how much hormone is floating in the highway of your veins at, say, 9:00 a.m. on a Tuesday. But it tells you nothing about where those hormones are going or how they are leaving. The DU-TCH test, because it analyzes urine metabolites over 24 hours, acts like a video recording of the elimination pathways.
It maps the metabolism. And this mapping brings us to one of the most fascinating genetic bottlenecks discussed in the material, the KOMT gene mutation.
The KOMT gene. Yeah, that stands for catechol-methyltransferase. It is an enzyme responsible for degrading various molecules in the body, including catecholamines like dopamine and epinephrine, and crucially, estrogens. If you inherit a mutation, a break in this gene, your body physically cannot metabolize and clear estrogen efficiently.
Okay, so if the liver's detoxification system is a bathtub, the KOMT gene is the drain.
Good analogy, yeah.
Estrogen is the water pouring in from the faucet. If you have this genetic break, your drain is fundamentally clogged. The water fills up the tub and overflows back into your bloodstream as those toxic metabolites.
Exactly. And the transcript features a profound anecdote from the male host of the podcast that proves this is a human biology issue, not just a female one. Despite being male, he discovered through testing that he had a severe KOMT gene break.
And because he was consuming synthetic vitamins his body couldn't process, which compounded the blockage, his system totally backed up. He became 700% estrogen dominant.
700%.
Yeah.
He grew a belly, retained massive amounts of water, and described feeling completely emotionally dysregulated. I mean, he said he felt crazy. He was experiencing the exact same biochemical overflow that women do. The mechanism is universal.
The clinical intervention for this isn't to simply shrug at bad genetics, though, right? Functional medicine uses targeted natural interventions to essentially unclog the drain and force the overflow down a safe pathway.
Right. And the primary intervention highlighted is dim-dilindalinbenthine.
DIM is a compound derived from cruciferous vegetables like broccoli, Brussels sprouts, and cabbage. So how does it actually work?
So DIM acts as a metabolic traffic cop in the liver. When estrogen reaches the liver to be broken down, DIM actively blocks the dangerous DNA-altering pathway, the 4-OH pathway, and forces the estrogen down the safe, healthy elimination pathway, which is the 2-OH pathway.
So by taking concentrated DIM, you provide the liver with the exact enzymatic support it needs to safely package and excrete the recycled hormone.
Exactly. The male host took DIM, combined with a short course of progesterone to immediately correct his ratio, and his symptoms vanished. The OB-GYN utilizes this exact protocol for her female patients constantly. But there's another hidden mechanism that can completely derail your hormones, even if your production is perfect and your KOMT drain is clear.
Wait, there's another one.
Oh, yeah. And that is SHBG, sex hormone binding globulin.
Okay, let's talk about SHBG.
SHBG is a glycoprotein produced primarily by the liver. Its biological purpose is to bind to sex hormones, particularly testosterone and estrogen, and transport them safely through the bloodstream. However, when a hormone is bound to SHBG, it is biologically inactive. It cannot enter a cell.
Let's visualize the cellular mechanics here for the listener. Every organ in your body has receptor sites on the outside of its cells. They function like intricate keyholes, waiting for a specific hormone key to enter, turn, and activate the cell's machinery.
Yes. So if SHBG binds to that hormone key, it's the equivalent of dipping the key in a thick layer of superglue. The key is physically present in the bloodstream. It floats right past the cellular keyhole. But because it is encased in this bulky binding protein, it literally cannot fit into the lock.
Wow. That perfectly explains the maddening experience so many patients have at the doctor's office. You go in with severe brain fog, zero libido, and zero energy. The doctor runs a standard blood panel, looks at your total testosterone, and says your levels are totally normal.
Right, but if your SHBG levels are sky high, all of that testosterone is superglued. You are functionally, at a cellular level, completely deficient. The total number is irrelevant if the hormone isn't bioavailable.
So what's the fix? The source provides specific natural interventions to lower SHBG and release those bound hormones, right?
They do. They highlight boron, which is a trace mineral, and a botanical called longjack, also known scientifically as tungcat ali.
By taking longjack or boron, you lower the production of the binding protein. You aren't even introducing new hormones into the system. You are simply dissolving the superglue off the hormones you already have.
Exactly. And the OB-GYN notes that within 14 to 30 days of lowering SHBG, women report their libido and energy returning, as she says, like a freight train.
That's incredible. Thousands of previously locked keys are suddenly cleaned and able to unlock receptors all over the body simultaneously. It's a massive, rapid cellular awakening.
It really is. And if you look at the environmental context of this metabolism puzzle, the source brings up xenoestrogens. These are synthetic chemical compounds ubiquitous in our modern environment. BPA and phthalates and plastics, parabens and cosmetics, highly processed GMO soy that structurally mimic estrogen in the body.
Xenoestrogens compound the metabolic bottleneck exponentially, don't they?
Oh, massively. They lock into cellular receptors and exert an estrogenic effect, but they are incredibly difficult for the liver to break down. If you already have a COMT genetic Brecka clogged drain and you are drinking out of heated plastic water bottles and eating processed foods, you are turning the faucet on full blast. You are flooding an already compromised detoxification system with synthetic hyperpotent estrogens.
So if the liver's elimination pathways, like COMT, can be bottlenecked so easily, it naturally raises the question about the body's intake pathways. If one genetic break can cause this much chaos on the way out, what happens if the mechanism for absorbing nutrients on the way in is also broken?
That is the big question. And it brings us to one of the most critical public health failures discussed in the entire transcript, the MTHFR gene mutation.
This is the methylation minefield. It is an issue that affects a staggering portion of the population. The text says anywhere from 25% to up to 60%, depending on the specific genetic variant. MTHFR stands for methyltetrahydrofolate reductase.
Say that 5 times fast.
Right, it is the gene responsible for the biochemical process of methylation.
And methylation sounds complex, but it's essentially just a refining process. It is the body's method of taking a raw, inactive nutrient and attaching a methyl group to it, a carbon atom and 3 hydrogen atoms, turning it into an active form that your cells can actually absorb and use for energy, DNA repair, and neurotransmitter creation.
Think of it like extracting crude oil from the ground. Crude oil contains immense potential energy, but if you pour it directly into the gas tank of a modern car, the engine won't run. In fact, the crude oil will gum up the works and destroy the engine. The crude oil must be refined into gasoline before the car can utilize it.
That's a perfect way to put it. For humans with the MTHFR mutation, their bodies lack the enzymatic machinery to refine certain synthetic vitamins. The 2 massive culprits highlighted in the source are synthetic vitamin B9, which is ubiquitous in our food supply as folic acid, and synthetic vitamin B12, known as cyanocobalamin.
If you look at almost any standard commercial multivitamin, prenatal vitamin, or if you walk down the bread and cereal aisle at the grocery store, you will see the phrase fortified with folic acid. By law, in many countries, white bread, pasta, and processed grains are pumped full of this synthetic compound.
And the historical intention behind this was actually noble. In the late 20th century, public health officials realized that folate deficiency in pregnant women led to severe neural tube defects in fetuses, like spina bifida. So they mandated fortifying the grain supply to ensure everyone got a baseline level.
But they utilized the synthetic form, folic acid, because it is cheap to manufacture, highly shelf-stable, and at the time, the genetic nuances of the MTHFR mutation were entirely unknown.
Right, they didn't know. But for the percentage of the population with this gene break, they physically cannot convert folic acid into the active form, folate. They cannot refine the crude oil.
So what happens when up to 60% of the population consumes a synthetic vitamin they can't process? It doesn't just harmlessly pass through the digestive tract.
No, it doesn't. It builds up in the bloodstream as unmetabolized folic acid, and it acts as a competitive inhibitor at the cellular receptor sites. To visualize this, imagine a broken key jammed into a lock. The unmetabolized folic acid occupies the cellular receptor, but it can't turn the lock. Because it's hogging the space, even if you eat a massive spinach salad full of real, natural, bioavailable folate, your cells can't absorb it. The receptor is blocked by the synthetic version.
Oh, wow. The source material illustrates the devastating clinical outcomes of this cellular blockade, too. The unmetabolized folic acid drives severe, unmanageable anxiety. It creates profound mood disorders. It severely disrupts natural hormone metabolism.
Which is exactly what triggered the 700% estrogen dominance in the male podcast host.
Yes. The transcript shares this terrifying clinical anecdote about a patient who was prescribed a high-dose, pharmaceutical-grade supplement containing massive amounts of synthetic folic acid and cyanocobalamin.
I remember this part. She would take this supplement in the morning, attempting to improve her health, and her anxiety would spike so violently that by the afternoon, she was relying on heavy prescription sedatives, Xanax or Valium, just to function and stop the panic attacks.
And her doctors couldn't figure out why she was experiencing sudden psychiatric episodes. They were entirely unaware that her cellular receptors were being gridlocked by a synthetic vitamin her genetics couldn't process.
It's heartbreaking,
Yeah.
but the physiological fix for this is beautifully, elegantly simple. You bypass the broken refining machinery entirely by giving the body the pre-refined fuel. Instead of synthetic folic acid, you supplement with methylated folate, specifically 5-methyltetrahydrofolate or 5-MTHF, and instead of cyanocobalamin, you utilize methylcobalamin.
You hand the cell the exact active ingredient it needs, ready to be utilized immediately, which begs a massive, frustrating question raised in the transcript. If the fix is this simple, and the genetic mutation is this prevalent, why does the traditional medical model and major public health organizations still aggressively push folic acid?
It's baffling.
The male host noted a crazy contradiction. A CDC article explicitly acknowledged that individuals with MTHFR mutations cannot properly process folic acid, yet in the very same document, recommended that pregnant women with the mutation should still consume folic acid instead of methylated folate.
It represents a staggering failure of institutional agility. The OB-GYN synthesizes the reasons perfectly, though. First, it comes down to legacy data. The foundational, massive clinical trials that established the standards of care for prenatal health were conducted decades ago using folic acid. The entire architecture of medical literature is built on those specific studies.
The transcript points out that nursing students today are still tested on board exams and required to answer folic acid to pass, regardless of current genetic science. The education system lags decades behind the biochemical reality.
And the second reason is purely economic. The host of the Ultimate Human podcast shared their experience trying to formulate a high-quality vitamin line. The contract manufacturers aggressively pressured them to use cyanocobalamin and folic acid. The reason is stark. The synthetic forms cost absolute pennies compared to the natural methylated forms.
Switching to active folate destroys massive corporate profit margins.
Exactly. It's a profound realization.
If you are listening to this, a critical self-audit is to go check your vitamin cabinet right now. Look at the ingredient list on your multivitamin, your B complex, or your prenatal. If it says folic acid or cyanocobalamin and you are dealing with unexplained brain fog, racing anxiety, or hormone dysregulation, you might literally be paying money to consume a competitive inhibitor that is locking up your cells.
Resolving these nutrient deficiencies is paramount because the lack of usable B vitamins doesn't just derail estrogen clearance and brain chemistry. It directly undermines the master thermostat of the entire human body.
Which brings us to the intricate relationship between the thyroid, the gut, and the surprising role of everyday salt. Let's unpack the master thermostat.
Okay, the thyroid gland. Situated at the base of your neck, it is the master regulator of your metabolic rate. It determines your baseline body temperature. This is why individuals with underfunctioning thyroids constantly have cold hands and feet, or why sudden shifts in thyroid function can exacerbate hot flashes.
It regulates a woman's menstrual cycle regularity, her baseline energy production, and exactly how efficiently her mitochondria burn fuel for energy, right?
Yes, it's the conductor of the metabolic orchestra. However, there is a critical mechanism that the standard medical model frequently overlooks. The thyroid gland itself primarily manufactures a hormone called T4, or thyroxine.
And T4 is essentially an inactive storage molecule, correct?
Exactly. P4 cannot enter a cell and turn on the metabolic engine. In order to actually generate energy, that T4 molecule must have one iodine atom cleaved off, converting it into T3 triiodothyronine. T3 is the active, potent hormone that physically binds to the receptors in your cells and turns up the thermostat.
And here is the mechanism that makes everything click together from the source material. 80% of that vital conversion from inactive T4 to active T3 happens outside of the thyroid gland.
Yes, 80%. The vast majority of this conversion takes place in the peripheral tissues, the liver, and crucially within the gut microbiome, utilizing an enzyme called deiodinase.
This perfectly explains why a patient can go to their doctor, complain of extreme fatigue, unexplained weight gain, and feeling freezing cold, only to have the doctor run a standard TSH and T4 blood test and declare your thyroid is perfectly fine.
Because the gland in their neck is successfully producing the storage hormone, but their actual cells are starving for the active T3 because the conversion process is broken.
This is the gut-thyroid axis. The source references the foundational work of neurologists like Dr. David Perlmutter, highlighting the deep systemic connection between gut health and overall biological function.
Right. If your diet is laden with refined sugars, ultra-processed foods, and refined carbohydrates, you create profound gut dysbiosis. You alter the bacterial colonies in your microbiome and foster a highly inflamed environment in your intestinal tract.
In that fiery, inflamed systemic environment, the deiodinase enzyme, the biological scissors meant to snip the T4 and turn it into T3, is downregulated. The conversion process completely stalls.
So you are left functionally hypothyroid at the cellular level, despite having normal lab results. The OB-GYN in the transcript also details the specific, non-negotiable nutritional building blocks the thyroid requires simply to manufacture the baseline T4.
What are they?
The gland is entirely dependent on adequate levels of iodine, selenium, and vitamin D.
Which leads to one of the most highly actionable, surprisingly simple daily interventions discussed in the deep dive. It's this micro-habit focused on cellular hydration, iodine delivery, and adrenal support. The salt trick.
Oh, I love the salt trick. The protocol is to take 1/4 teaspoon of high-quality Celtic sea salt and dissolve it in a glass of water first thing in the morning. And it is vital to differentiate this from standard table salt.
Standard white table salt has been heavily processed, bleached, and heated to extreme temperatures. It has been stripped of almost all its nutritional value, retaining roughly 1% of its original mineral profile. It is essentially pure sodium chloride, heavily laced with anti-caking agents like sodium aluminosilicate so it doesn't clump in the shaker.
It is an isolated industrial chemical. Conversely, unrefined, wet, grayish Celtic sea salt retains approximately 76% of its original trace minerals. It contains bioavailable magnesium, potassium, and crucial trace amounts of iodine, all suspended in a biologically recognizable matrix.
So when you consume this mineral-dense water upon waking, you are pulling water into the cells for true intracellular hydration rather than just flushing fluid through the extracellular space.
Furthermore, you are delivering raw, necessary minerals directly to your adrenal glands. The adrenals manage your morning cortisol spike, the natural biological response that wakes you up and gives you energy. By providing these minerals, you support a healthy stress response instead of relying on the artificial, jittery spike of caffeine on an empty, dehydrated stomach.
The host of the podcast makes a profound observation here. Most people are walking around in a state of such chronic cellular dehydration that their physiological thirst mechanism is broken. The brain misinterprets the signals of profound dehydration as hunger or chronic fatigue.
And it is worth noting a specific caution from the source material regarding Himalayan pink salt. While historically popular, recent environmental data suggests that due to certain mining practices and regional pollution, some pink salts have shown high levels of heavy metal contamination. Therefore, the clinically preferred choice is the damp, mineral-rich Celtic sea salt.
It is a 5-second, extremely inexpensive habit that fundamentally resets the biochemical baseline of your hydration and adrenal function for the entire day.
It's so easy to do.
Okay, so we have mapped out an incredibly complex, interconnected system. We've examined how the pregnenolone steal drains the body's calming reserves. We've seen how the COMT gene mutation clogs the liver's ability to excrete estrogen. We understand how SHBG superglues hormones, rendering them useless. We've navigated the MTHFR methylation minefield where synthetic vitamins act as cellular blockades. And we've connected gut inflammation directly to the shutdown of thyroid conversion.
That's a lot of biology.
It's a ton. So knowing all of these mechanisms, how do we actually implement this knowledge to reverse the most heartbreaking consequences of these imbalances?
This transition from mechanism to application brings us to the clinical protocols. The source material outlines highly specific, actionable steps for recovering fertility, healing from miscarriage, and restoring daily vitality. And the OB-GYN delivers these protocols with immense, deeply personal emotional weight.
Because this isn't just clinical theory for her, is it?
Not at all. This is a board-certified physician who has guided thousands of women through pregnancy, who had access to the absolute top-tier medical specialists and infinite resources, yet she suffered through miserable, traumatic, unexplained infertility herself.
She revealed that for years her biological systems were failing, and traditional medicine offered her no functional direction. She ultimately chose to adopt 4 children from her own patients.
Right. It wasn't until years later when she transitioned into functional medicine and ran comprehensive cellular-level labs on herself that she discovered the root cause. Her vitamin D level was at a 9.
A level of 9 is astounding. For clinical context, an optimal functional vitamin D level is generally considered to be between 50 and 80 nanograms per milliliter. A level of 9 represents a severe, bone-aching systemic deficiency.
And furthermore, because she was unaware of her MTHFR methylation status, she was consuming standard prenatal vitamins, unknowingly flooding her system with synthetic folic acid she couldn't process. She possessed the highest echelons of medical education possible, yet she was physically miserable and infertile because the traditional allopathic system completely missed the foundational biochemical building blocks.
It exposes a tragic, systemic blind spot in how we treat women's health. Infertility and the trauma of repeating miscarriages are deeply, intimately tied to these unaddressed nutrient deficiencies and methylation bottlenecks.
They absolutely are. The transcript highlights that following a miscarriage, which is a profoundly traumatic event physically and emotionally, regardless of when it occurs, the body requires roughly 30 days just to reset its basic hormonal rhythm.
To support that reset, or to assist women struggling to conceive, or simply to recover a normal cycle for a woman feeling awful, she utilizes a strict 30-day targeted intervention.
Let's break down her protocol. First, an active methylated multivitamin. This entirely bypasses any potential MTHFR gene breaks, ensuring the cells actually receive usable B vitamins for energy and DNA repair.
Okay, that makes sense based on what we discussed.
Second, robust, clinically dosed vitamin D supplementation to pull those levels out of the basement. Third, high-quality omega-3 fatty acids, specifically focusing on high yields of EPA and DHA.
The inclusion of omega-3s is metabolically critical. Hormones are synthesized directly from fat and cholesterol. You cannot manufacture complex steroid hormones without the necessary raw lipid building blocks.
This is exactly why the aggressive low-fat diet craze of the 1980s and 1990s was so devastating to female fertility and overall hormonal health. Women were starving their endocrine systems of the exact materials needed to build progesterone and estrogen, replacing those healthy fats with processed, sugar-laden carbohydrates. The body needs the fats from avocados, coconut oil, and wild-caught fatty fish to construct the hormone molecules.
The 4th specific supplement she adds to the protocol, particularly tailored for menstruating women with heavy cycles, is iron bisglycinate, dosed at 30 milligrams during menses.
Iron is non-negotiable for the transport of oxygen via hemoglobin, but the specific form of the iron matters immensely. Standard iron supplements, like ferrous sulfate, often require a highly acidic stomach environment to break down, frequently resulting in severe gastric distress, cramping, and constipation.
Nobody wants that.
Definitely not. Iron bisglycinate is a chelated form. The iron molecule is bound to an amino acid glycine, allowing it to be absorbed intact through the intestinal wall, making it highly bioavailable and exceptionally gentle on the digestive tract.
If you are anemic, your cells are fundamentally suffocating. A biological system cannot sustain the massive energetic requirements of a pregnancy, nor can it maintain daily cognitive energy if the cellular mitochondria lack oxygen.
Very true. Now, alongside the supplements, she implements a ruthless, incredibly catchy dietary heuristic. If it's white, it's not right.
It is a brilliant clinical shorthand to immediately eliminate the primary drivers of systemic inflammation and synthetic vitamin exposure. The rule is absolute. Remove white flour. Remove refined white sugar. Remove white rice. Remove soda.
Yes. Furthermore, aggressively avoid any packaged food that proudly declares it is enriched or fortified on the label, because that is the regulatory neon sign indicating the manufacturer has pumped the product full of synthetic, unmethylated folic acid.
The OB-GYN is also careful to add a vital caveat that trips up many patients transitioning to a cleaner diet: Gluten-free junk food is still junk food.
This is such an important distinction. People will often realize they need to ditch the processed white wheat bread, but they replace it with a highly processed, sugar-filled, gluten-free cookie made from refined tapioca or potato starch.
The clinical goal is not merely the avoidance of the gluten protein. The biological goal is to eliminate massive insulin spikes, reduce gut inflammation, and maximize nutrient density.
Exactly. A highly processed, refined, gluten-free snack still severely spikes blood glucose levels, triggering an insulin cascade that disrupts hormone balance. It still fuels gut dysbiosis, and crucially, it still starves the body of the healthy fats and trace minerals required to actually manufacture hormones.
The transcript asserts that if a woman strictly follows this protocol, incorporating the methylated vitamins, optimizing vitamin D, supplying the good fats, and aggressively removing the white, inflammatory, fortified foods, she can predictably regulate her ovulation within a single 30-day cycle.
Just 30 days. The clinical recommendation is to utilize ovulation predictor kits between days 11 and 14 of the cycle to visibly track this returning function. Within 1 month, a patient can take an endocrine system that was completely stalled out and bring it vibrantly back online.
If we extrapolate the meaning of this 30-day intervention, it represents a massive, empowering paradigm shift in how we approach female health. It forcibly moves the entire conversation out of the dark, helpless realm of mysterious, untreatable suffering. It strips away the victimhood associated with phrases like, "I'm just getting older," or "my body is just broken."
It demystifies the suffering. It turns the entire process into a biological, biochemical equation, an equation that, with the right data, you have the absolute power to balance.
It restores agency to the patient. It means that your severe symptoms are not a life sentence, nor are they a character flaw. They're simply a dashboard of vital information. The check engine lights are flashing. And once you acquire the correct manual understanding your methylation status, your COMT pathways, your gut thyroid axis, you can systematically repair the engine.
Which brings us to the culmination of an incredible, dense journey today.
Yeah, we started by looking at a broken home thermostat. We realized that the brutal symptoms of perimenopause and menopause, the hot flashes, the rapid weight gain, the bone-deep exhaustion are not just a storm you are required to tough out. They are desperate biological cries for cellular assistance.
We explored the delicate, precise dance of the hormone trio. We saw exactly how chronic modern stress triggers the pregnenolone steal, draining your calming progesterone and your energizing brain-protecting testosterone, leaving you adrift in a highly volatile ocean of unchecked, unbuffered estrogen.
We looked deeply at the genetic bottlenecks that dictate how our bodies process the modern world. We examined the COMT mutation that clogs the liver's ability to safely drain and excrete that recycled estrogen. We saw how the SHBG protein acts as superglue, binding your hormones and rendering normal lab results functionally meaningless.
And of course, we navigated the MTHFR mutation, the methylation minefield, where the very synthetic vitamins we are mandated to consume act as competitive inhibitors, locking up cellular receptors for a massive portion of the population.
And we connected the final systemic dots between refined inflammatory diets, the resulting gut dysbiosis, and the liver's inability to convert inactive thyroid hormone into the active T3 required to turn on the metabolic thermostat for every single cell in your body.
So to everyone listening right now, you do not have to settle for a baseline of feeling just okay. You do not have to accept waking up exhausted, feeling inexplicably anxious, or fighting a physical body that feels like it is slowly turning against you.
When the host of the Ultimate Human podcast asked this deeply experienced OB-GYN at the very end of their interview what it truly means to be an ultimate human, her answer wasn't about running ultramarathons or doing ice baths or biohacking to live to 150 years old.
No, her answer was remarkably simple yet profound: balance and peace.
Balance and peace. And what the deep biological dive into this source material has proven today is that balance and peace are not just abstract spiritual concepts, they are tangible, biologically achievable states. They are the natural result of an optimized cellular system.
I want to leave you with a final, lingering thought that builds upon the foundational mechanics we've discussed today. We've seen how something as seemingly insignificant as swapping processed table salt for mineral-dense Celtic sea salt in your morning water, or changing the specific molecular shape of a single B vitamin from synthetic folic acid to methylated folate, can fundamentally alter a woman's fertility, drastically reduce her daily anxiety levels, and entirely change the trajectory of how her body ages.
It literally changes the expression of her biology.
It does, which raises a profound, almost philosophical question for all of us to mull over as we go about our day. If our fundamental biochemistry is this exquisitely sensitive to these tiny daily inputs, how much of what we currently consider our fixed personality, our baseline level of anxiety, our quick temper, our lack of motivation, or what we passively assume is our natural aging process,
Me.
how much of that is actually an illusion?
How much of who we firmly believe we are is simply a biological reflection of what is or isn't on our plate and how our specific genes are interacting with it?
It's something to think about. It completely shatters how you view that muddy, confusing diagnostic landscape we started with. Because maybe the diagnostic tools aren't broken after all. Maybe we've just been looking at the wrong kind of film.